Welcome to this live episode of Amusing Jews. We're typically just recordings, so you get to see how the sausage is made. This particular show celebrates Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedman.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
And we're delighted to be here as part of the inaugural Ladies of Laughter Comedy Fest organized by the Jewish Federation of Greater San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys. And as you can probably tell, neither Joey nor I can claim to be ladies of laughter ourselves, but our guest certainly is.
Rena Strober was the voice of Esmeraude, a member of the villainous Black Moon clan on the anime series Sailor Moon. Her Broadway credits include the role of Cosette in Les Miserables and a national tour of Fiddler on the Roof, playing Tevye's oldest daughter, Tzeitel. Recent television credits include characters on the Netflix animated series Dogs in Space. Rena also made a film adaptation of her one-woman show, Spaghetti and Matzo Balls, about how she rediscovered her Jewish roots from the Catskills to Broadway to an infamous Italian restaurant in Spanish Harlem. Hello, Rena.
Hello.
So, Rena, do you have any role models who are Jewish female comedians, perhaps, that you looked up to as you were developing as an actress and a voice actress and all of that stuff?
I'd say my earliest Jewish influence in the Jewish comedy world was Madeline Kahn. I watched her religiously, first of all, in History of the World. I shouldn't have seen it as early as I did. And then I knew her from this Sondheim tribute concert she did, and she did Not Getting Married Today. And I think it was 1988. So she was my first idea of a soubrette, which was a comedic soprano, because sopranos were often the boring, ingenue, but she was a great singer, but really funny. And I loved her in all the Mel Brooks movies. I love Joan Rivers, Gilda Radner. I mean, the women who didn't care about looking perfect, they put their comedy first. And Carol Burnett, not Jewish, but I still love her. The women who were just unabashedly themselves. And I thought Phyllis Diller was Jewish because I was thinking about her today from the Friars Club, but she wasn't Jewish, but we still love Phyllis Diller.
I think she's an honorary member of the exclusive club we call Jewish.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe. I remember you mentioning to us previously that you joined the Friars Club some years ago. You were not only one of the youngest members involved by a long shot, but also one of the few females. How did that all go down?
I love the Friars Club. To be clear, it was the Friars Club in New York, not the one in California. The original Friars Club that created the roasts back in the day that Phyllis Diller, famously dressed as a man because they never let women in. It was a place, that was meant for men in comedy to meet, until Liza Minnelli was the first woman allowed in 1988. And I had been spending time with old men with guns at a restaurant called Rayo's in Spanish Harlem, an Italian restaurant. And I liked the old men and I wasn't so fond of the guns. So after I decided to not go back to Rayo's anymore, I still needed to I needed my old man fix in New York. And I was asked to go to one of the roasts at I think it was Jack Carter or somebody. I forget who the roast was for. And I went and I met a bunch of people. And Marvin Scott, who is actually a newscaster from New York, he sponsored me to join the Friars Club. And there were a handful of us, Jeff Ross, Lisa Lampanelli. There were a handful of us younger folk, Gilbert Gottfried, the late wonderful Gilbert Gottfried. And I was sponsored, and then I joined, and then the next few roasts, I was actually on the dais. Freddie Roman asked me to sing. I was always asked to sing. I was never asked to speak. So I would sing the national anthem at the top of the roasts, and I would sing there every Thursday night. We had a jazz night at the Friars Club, which was on 55th and 5th. It was Milton Berle's old home that he donated. And every day I would go, that was my sanctuary. I would go to the gym there because I felt really athletic because nobody else could really get up off of the machines. And I was like, look, I could stand and sit. I felt really young there. And I just got to meet incredible people. And yeah, it was a wonderful part of my New York story. I'm from New York, so the fact that I could be at the Friars Club all the time was just, I felt really lucky.
So you mentioned that they would have you sing and not speak. Was that because you were a woman, because you were young, because you were both? What do you think?
I think they knew me as a singer. I was on Broadway at the
Mhm.
time, and so uh, it's just you know, and I like singing, and I don't think I think it was more me. I didn't push. You know, I was a fan of the comics there, especially Lisa and you know, Jeff Ross, and I put myself in that position where I offered myself up as a singer. I never introduced myself as a comic. I still don't call myself a comic. I call myself a comedian. I love doing funny things and writing in a comedic way. I'm not a stand-up. I have a lot of admiration for stand-ups. Um, so I think that's why. And Freddie loved when I sang "God Bless America" um, at the roasts. I think more people were funny there than could sing, so I think I just leaned into that.
As long as you're okay being the token singer.
It's good. Whatever pays the bills.
That's amazing, though, that the people that you got to know who are no longer with us, some of those names that you mentioned, and I know that you have this really terrific Passover story that involves Sid Caesar, and I know there's a lot more to your Sid Caesar story as well, if you want to share some of that with us.
It's so interesting. I grew up knowing about Sid. I not as much as from his TV shows, but he was in History of the World. He was the critic who got up and peed on the art. And then he was in Grease. So I knew Sid Caesar. I knew that name as someone who knew Mel Brooks. You know, it's all about who knows Mel Brooks in the, you know, in life. And so at the Friars Club, I never got to meet him because that was New York, but there were pictures of him around. So when I moved to LA, I had my Sid Caesar book, and I knew that he met with his writers at Factor's Deli every Wednesday. So I would go and I'd sit in booths and I would just watch and sort of try to be close to him. Fast forward many years later, I'll make this very short. I was doing a musical with Jason Alexander called When You're in Love, the Whole World is Jewish. And I met this wonderful couple, the Zygmans, who were caretakers of Sid here in LA. And they said, something about you makes us want to introduce you to Sid. He doesn't see people anymore, but there was just, and I had said that I was in the Friars Club and they were in the Friars Club here. So they brought me to his home and I met him, and he wasn't that connected to life. He was in a hospital bed in his house and he just wasn't that connected. But I started to sing, and the more I sang, he would come to, and he started telling me stories, and I started to learn more about him, and we developed a very strong friendship. And during that year, because it was a year to the day that I met him, to when he passed away, but he had Passover Seder there. They'd been doing it for 20 years with Carl and Mel Brooks and Lainey Kazan and Arthur Hiller, everybody. And so I helped do the Seder. It was me and Theodore Bickel, who had played my father in Fiddler on the Roof on the tour, Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner. And it's like if you said, pick a celebrity you can be on an island with, you know, it was that. It was like I was at a Passover Seder with my idols. And I did the 4 questions. I changed the tune, of course, as Jews do, to match the tune of the song Sid sang on Broadway in Little Me. I was going to do the 4 questions to Springtime for Hitler in honor of Mel, but I wasn't sure how that would go over with.
It's a springtime festival.
Exactly. Um, so, yeah, it was one of those. I did it twice. The first year, and then the second year, he already passed away, but we still held the Seder. And Theo wasn't there, so I had to actually lead the Seder. And Jeff Ross would be there, Eileen Graff, Jerry Cutler, Connie Stevens. What's his name? Why do I have a blank? I know him as Joanna Gleason's father. He used to host Let's Make a Deal, the Monty Hall, of course.
Yeah.
Monty Hall. And Mel would just marvel at the idea that his friend came back a little bit towards the end of his life through music. Yeah.
Yeah, as you're mentioning some of those names, I mean the old man fix that you mentioned earlier, you must have been like overdosing.
It was crazy. It was crazy. I've been writing about it, so I do plan on publishing a book about that year of my life, not just about Sid, but about the fact that any generation that's not an octogenarian needs to remember to connect with octogenarians. And what's the octogenarian word for people in their 90s? Nanogenarian?
Yeah.
Yeah, that those generations are so important to connect to and reap their knowledge. And even if they're not celebrities, I mean, I was, yes, just mentioning that, but the old man, at the grocery store, the stories that you can find out from these people. So I'm trying to like create a movement of people from 18 years old to 50 to 60 to sit down with someone, even if for 20 minutes, and it can really shift the course of your life when you.
Yeah. You're reminding me of something Joey and I were talking about the other day, which is, a lot of our podcasts for the audience who was not who hasn't checked us out yet. A lot of it's retrospective. We talk a lot about kind of the yesteryears, and we try to bring back people who maybe were involved in the things that we love growing up and so forth and so on. When we talk about connecting with the youth in a Jewish context, it's typically around like fear of intermarriage and not going to synagogue and blah 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 blah. But Joey and I were talking about, we don't want to lose like that Jewish connection to comedy. We want to connect young kids to the amusing Jews because that's such a rich and important part of our cultural heritage that we don't want to leave behind. So what you're saying about, this intergenerational connection, I think it's very relevant, and it's something that's actually super important to me, much more important than the synagogue thing I was just blah blahing about, is actually connecting our people to the humor, right? And this like legacy of humor.
Well, I tell people, Jonathan, that when they said, "Who's Sid Caesar?" first I catch my breath and I sit down. Then I punch them in the face. But no, I don't. I don't hit anybody, just with my mind. And I say the reason we have sitcoms
Mm-hmm.
is because of Sid Caesar, and the reason we have televisions in our homes is because when Sid's hour was on, uh, the TVs were selling off the shelves, and so they had to mass produce televisions. His writers' room, Neil Simon, Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, like all of these people, Sid Caesar gave them jobs. They kept trying to fire Mel Brooks because he was such a troublemaker, and Sid fought for him. So he is the creation of television in my mind. Norman Lear at that time as well. But they all come from Father Sid and a room full of Jews. Do you know the play Laughter on the 23rd? Was it Laughter on the 23rd floor or Laughter on the 24th floor? What floor was it?
You got me.
It's a play about the writer's room. There's a beautiful play about it, and there's one woman in the room. I think it was Joan Rivers. Was it based on Joan Rivers? But yeah, I mean, not to mention like Albert Einstein and those people, but comedy is due to Jews. That is why we have comedy. Okay, I'll get off my anger now. Very
What?
passionate about.
A great thing though, if someone says they don't know who Sid Caesar is, before you, have too much of a, yeah, before you faint completely, you could have them open their phones, which most people have these days,
I love that
and
you
look.
said open your phones because Jonathan has to open.
That's
his
what I
phone.
say because, and my wife makes fun of me for saying that, but I have a flip phone, so I actually open the darn thing. Anyway, the point is, other people have these things that are fancier than mine, and you can have them look on YouTube and show them like the general sketch and stuff like that. And if they don't think that's funny, then I don't think they're human,
Not
at
human.
that point.
Oh, the general. When after Sid passed away, I went back to New York to the Friars Club because we did a tribute for him, and I got to sing, and we had his hat from the general on the stage.
Ah, Cool.
Yeah, and I think his that jacket was in his closet. I'm actually sitting at Sid Caesar's writing desk right now. It's a mess, so I don't want to turn my computer, but I have his desk. I have this overlooking me, just him sitting at my desk to remind me to keep. He would always say, "Rena, write what you know, write what you know," and I loved that. He felt that comedy always comes from something that you know. I have a cell on the wall, and then of course Mel Brooks's signed History of the World album that I used to listen to that I had Mel sign. But yeah, I'm an old soul, but I think it's time for young people to start opening the conversations with the old people.
Amen.
So bringing it back to you a little, Rena, you've done a bunch of voice acting and some live acting on stage and screen, which we did get to see. What are some of the differences between these types of acting?
Oh, you don't have to wear clothes for voiceover acting. It's really enjoyable. Um, people are always saying like, "How do I be a voice actor?" And I always say, "Just be an actor." Like it's the same exact thing. And then there's technique, like having to be a certain, space away from the microphone and not moving your head. There are things like that, but when you're an actor, you're an actor, you're a storyteller. On stage, I always tell this to my students, I teach voice to young singers. It's about taking up space, right? And it's about how much space you're taking up. And on stage, you have to create a bigger space. Whereas if there's a camera here, you're telling the same story and hopefully you're feeling the same things, but your space is just smaller. It's actually why I love multicam, why I love working at Disney Channel and Nickelodeon. Is because it's just like doing a musical, because you can be really big and then there's all those cameras all around. But it's all storytelling. And as long as you're connected to its core and its honesty, I don't think there's any difference. In voiceover, you do things 3 times in a row for the most part. Same thing with film and TV. You get to do it a few times. Stage is very different. You rehearse and rehearse. One day you rehearse and rehearse. And then you do it once. And what I always prefer stage, mostly because the audience is the last remaining piece, and it's always a surprise, and it's always different. When I was on the road, I traveled with Les Miserables and with Fiddler, and you do 8 shows a week, and you get very familiar with the psychology of audiences, where Friday night audiences are the worst. Because they've had a long week and they're mostly husbands who've been dragged to the theater. And so you always have to work really hard. Saturday matinees are great. Saturday night, people are like a little drunk from dinner. Like there's just this amazing, but it's always different, always different. Wednesday afternoons are the old crowd and they leave early. So we called it the leaving ovation in Boca. You think that they're standing and you're like, oh no, I guess you're going to your car during sunrise, sunset. All right. Glad we had this time together. So yeah, I love the theater because it's always different.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of theater experience beyond high school myself, but how is it? I mean, you're a professional, but I know that, one night can be like an amazing electric audience that they're laughing at everything, and then the next night the same shtick doesn't land at all, and they're just sort of crickets. How do you persevere through that, knowing that it's live and everything else?
Well, therapy, because then you start to question yourself. But it's interesting you ask that because I think a good joke, if it's done well and it's directed well, should land no matter what. There's got to be somebody in there who found it funny. I think it'll be rare if it really hits and then doesn't hit at all. I would blame the writer in that case. I just you try to blame other people. Um, but I think it's also about moving on quickly, knowing the audience and getting out of there fast. But that's also what makes it fun, like trying something that could work. Jason, when I worked with Jason Alexander, he always would say like, turn to the audience and shrug. If something doesn't land, you create another funny moment after it. And then it's all theater. It's not the end of the world. I think when we're young actors, we it's all life or death and the stakes are high, but at the end of the day, it's just not just, but it's entertainment. So You just move on very quickly.
Yeah,
Sure.
whenever that kind of thing happens to me in other contexts, which, where I'm working, I just say, I'm getting paid the same either way.
See? You follow it up with like when I tell a really boring story, if I see that it's boring, I will always go, and then I found $5. Like just to add to like make up for the boring story I just told.
Yeah, so, speaking of acting, I know that you have shared with me some concerns about non-Jewish actors playing famous Jewish people, particularly in movies. Care to elaborate on that?
Yes, and I've gotten into a lot of trouble on the socials with this, but I think this is just my opinion. It happens to be right, but it's just mine. Um, if you are playing a historical person, a person that existed, like Fanny Bryce or
Hmm.
Joan Rivers, somebody who existed, I think they should be played by a Jewish person. I think Martin Luther King should be played by an African American. I think, you know, people should, if it's a real person, you should come at it with the somebody who's culturally understands that story. But so that is to say, if Meet the Fockers or all these wonderful movies with Jewish characters, I'm not as I don't care as much where like the newer characters or a fictional character is cast. Um, that I think if you can do, but I really am passionate. Like if they made a doc about Dr. Ruth and they didn't cast somebody who comes from trauma inside, she's a Holocaust survivor, like I would be. First of all, there's Jewish actors. Like it's not that there's a shortage. Our parents sent us to theater camp. Um, but yeah, I really am passionate about historical figures being played accurately, but not all Jewish characters. See,
Right.
I'm flexible.
Yeah, I mean, look, some of the greatest Jews on screen ever have been Italians, right? What's interesting, I think, too, is you're saying that, Steven Spielberg cast his own mother with a non-Jewish actor. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess opinions vary.
I didn't see the film because
I mean, well, you boycotted it. I only
yes,
didn't see it because it looked boring.
I kept my $12. Thank you very much.
I feel like
Very
we
well.
have a weird, like, tense relationship with Steven. At some point, we'll get him on the pod.
He's done great things,
Anyways,
though. I mean, his show of
yeah,
Foundation and the fact that he's telling Jewish stories. Maybe he owed a favor. I don't know what it was about, but his West Side Story was also so incredible that I'm not mad at him anymore. I didn't call him back a few times. I let him suffer. Just kidding. He doesn't call me.
nice. And actually, the that question was like somebody else was going to ask that question, so that was good. Uh, what advice do you have for the up and coming Rena Strobers out there?
Marry the doctor. Just, um, advice. The industry is totally different now. I don't encourage any young people to go into this industry. It is a scary place for supporting yourself. I'd say do theater, like sing and dance and do it. Just don't do it professionally. It's hard. Our union was on strike last year. I lost so much work. It's really difficult. I find ways to make people laugh in other ways. I'm in cantorial school now, and I use the bima as my place to make people laugh, which some people think is weird that it's shticky Shabbat, but shticky Shabbat, Jonathan. We have to do
Yeah,
that.
that's the next one.
Wash your hands. It's a shticky Shabbat. So I would just say find ways to feed your artistic soul, but for the love of God, I'm a mom. Just get a job and a degree and have health insurance. With AI coming down the pike, there's just with social media, with influencers, it's a very different world. If you're a stage person, I think the Broadway world still has so much to offer and theater, but film and TV, I mean, I don't know. I wish I could say like if you have a dream, you can do it. But It's a scary place. It is a terrifying place. Mary
Well,
the
that's a
Doctor.
little depressing.
I'm
How
sorry.
about
I'm sorry.
how about before we go to audience Q&A? I see we have a few of those. Um, would you care to maybe melt our hearts a little bit with some song?
Oh, a song. Okay, I might have to put my glasses on for this. Um, yeah, I would love to do a song. One thing I love about comics, certain comics, is subtlety and simplicity. I liked that about Sid. You think of him as a big comedy, but if you look at his work, it was very subtle. So I thought I would do this song. It's very simple, and yeah, if you have an animal or a pet, go to the other room and get them. Make sure. My son, yeah. Can you hear it? A friendly face, the kind of face that melts you with a grin. The kind of eyes that welcome you the minute you walk in. A tender glance you simply can't refuse. It's times like this a girl could use a dog. He listens when you tell him things. There's nothing you can't say. And unlike certain people, you can teach him how to stay. And if the world is giving you the blues, he cheers you up by chewing up the news. It's things like that that make you choose a dog. Other people need romance, dancing, playing around. Other people need constant fun. Well, I'm not one. I have my feet on the ground. Give me a quiet night, a stack of books, a tuna melt on rye, a simple walk together underneath the starry sky, and suddenly the night is something grand, and all because there's someone special there who's gazing at the views, his head upon your shoes. It's times like this I sure could use a dog. Simple.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
It's from a musical called Lucky Stiff, and apparently it's a musical based on Bernie's Weekend at Bernie's.
Hmm.
Very
What will they
strict.
think of next?
Thanks for letting me share that. I love that song, and I think there are not enough songs for that are just like honored to honor our pets.
Hmm. By the way, you mentioned Monty Hall earlier. Oh, look at that.
Oh, was someone singing about me?
Yeah. So, Rena,
Lauren started beckoning him.
I think I said this to you before, but Monty Hall was the MC at the first Bark Mitzvah
Oh my God.
back in Beverly Hills in like 1959 or something like that. So, speaking of honoring one's dog, one's pet,
Bark Mitzvah.
Joey, I think we have some questions from our wonderful audience.
Yeah, we do have a couple, although they're also just using it to like comment as well.
Ah,
Lo and behold. Um, but the first question that came in was they wanted all three of us to say what was our favorite comedy movie. You know, I
ah.
was raised up on Buster Keaton and Laurel and Hardy, as well as the Marx Brothers and Three Stooges. So, you know, a few Jewish names in there, or maybe many. I don't know if I can pin down my favorite comedy movie, though, to be honest.
There are many. I'll let Rena go, unless you're also trying to figure it out in your
I
mind.
mean, the first thing that are, I mean, History of the World, and then it takes me to Spaceballs.
Mhm.
Um, but I think Soap Dish is one of the funniest films. And then The Jerk.
Ah,
Um,
yes.
I mean, just to name a few.
Yeah, so The Jerk comes to mind. Of course, Michael Elias, the screenwriter, one of our friends, a friend of the show and a guest a couple times. Terrific guy. He also wrote The Frisco Kid, which is another great, I don't know if it's a great comedy necessarily, but it's a very important movie. Um, Speaking of Westerns, I think probably my favorite, if I'm being completely honest, is Three Amigos.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was co-written by Steve Martin, we know, and also a couple of Jewish guys, Lorne Michaels and Randy Newman, the musician. It's
Ooh.
actually a very Jewish movie. If you watch it with that perspective, it's kind of this idea of vaudeville goes west, or like the Jewish entertainers, the urbanites try to rough it. This was kind of a trope in a lot of earlier westerns where they did include Jewish characters. They would be like performers who pretended to be cowboys and kind of didn't really, uh, you know, they weren't really right for that role, but ultimately they became heroic through trial by fire. So it's kind of a classic story, but it's also, at least for me, one of my favorites. I remember seeing it 3 times in the theater when it came out as a young, impressionable boy. So that one definitely comes to mind as a favorite comedy. I think it was panned at the time too by the critics, and now it's like a classic. So there you go.
Then the other question that came in was specifically for Rena. What would be your biggest inspiration?
My biggest inspiration, I mean, Jonathan Friedman.
I get that a lot.
Um, you know what? It's weird. I know I mentioned Dr. Ruth before, and I know people think of her as a sex therapist, but she has a book called Musically Speaking that I was really obsessed with in college. She's a huge inspiration in that she took her trauma and turned it into music and education and entertainment. She if you can find this book, Musically Speaking, it's very small and short, and it's about how her father used to play records while the Nazis were marching down her street, and so for years she couldn't listen to certain music. It really triggered her, and then she finally figured out how to do it and moved on from that, and how she's changed her connection to music. And it was a really powerful book during my college days, and I still and I just watched. She's 95 right now, or 96, and she has not only outlived, but she has taken trauma to such a beautiful place, to a degree in which she lives beyond. Um, and it's like when I finally was with Mel Brooks, and of course I asked the burning question, "What's up with Hitler?" And he says, "If we can make people laugh at him, we win." And so that's why Mel Brooks is also one of my biggest heroes. But also people like Bernadette Peters, Madeline Kahn, all the weird soprano singers, Stephen Sondheim. I mean, he's all over other rooms, in my house, and I've got my Les Mis here. So people who've worked really hard, and I tend to find people who are Jewish, just who have that soul or who are connected to survivors, like they work in a different way. And so I think,
Mm.
yeah, those people. Dr.
You,
Ruth.
this is a complete aside, and I don't know why I'm bringing it up in a public forum like this, but you mentioned Dr. Ruth and Mel Brooks, and I'm a little worried. I've heard that short people live longer. and I'm not that short. What do you think, Rena? What are my chances?
I think if you cut yourself in half, there's two Jonathan,
Okay,
then you'll have like a very long life.
Joey's even taller than me, so
Really?
Joey, we gotta work this out.
If we lived in the Stooge universe, I feel like that would physically work to cut us in half. Rena, you were kind of calling back to your, you know, Dr. Father. Yeah, I don't know. I try not to worry too much because I'm also left-handed, and I think that also means a shorter lifespan. But I'm not going to think about it. We're here enjoying ourselves as we're alive.
That's that's the key. Joey, I think there's a really provocative question here at the
See?
bottom of the list. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, from Anna Rose. Yeah, let me go ahead and read it. So we mentioned it's important if there's a historical person that is Jewish, that the part would be played by a Jewish person. If a Jewish person is not as good at the part during audition as the non-Jewish person, would you go with the non-Jewish person for the sake of the acting, or would these auditions just be closed to non-Jews?
It's
Hmm.
such a good question, and it's a fair question. And there's many sides to this, and all the sides are right. Um, I think casting and directors have to work a little harder. And I think if someone fails in an audition, it's either about working with them or moving on to somebody else. I really don't think that there's a shortage of strong Jewish actors out there. It's about finding them and giving them opportunity, and not just taking the most famous people. So it's about people working a little harder to find them. But if the non-Jewish person is at the end of the day the best person, we want the story told well and beautiful. So yeah, that would totally be okay. I just think we all have to work harder on finding those Jewish actors and giving people opportunities that aren't famous ones. Um, so yeah, but yes, yes, and it's I would never, like you say, close to non-Jews. I think the first level of audition should be for Jewish performers, and then open it up. Absolutely.
It's interesting. So your friend, who you introduced us to, Jason Kravitz, the very funny comedic actor, he was, I saw a little thing. He was being interviewed alongside John Turturro, the great Italian actor who's often a Jew in the Coen brothers movies and probably in other films as well. And Jason said something that kind of I've been thinking about since I saw that, which is, these immigrant communities in New York specifically grew up in the same neighborhoods. They went to the same restaurants, the same schools. They were the friends, and all of that stuff. I mean, they basically were part of the same culture. And he said that oftentimes Italian actors and Jewish actors are interchangeable, and sometimes maybe he was just flattering John Turturro, but sometimes he feels that John Turturro is more Jewish than he is as a Jewish actor. And, of course, we're not talking about historic figures in the sense of just a character, like in a Coen brother movie. But I think the sensitivity to the role, the learning the part. I mean, Al Pacino has played a Jew many times, and he does a pretty good job most of the time. Although he's always just kind of Al Pacino. That's a whole other thing. But ultimately there's a way to maybe convince the audience, right? And that means the Jewish audience as well, that they really own it and they are able to embody this person.
Yeah. It's about doing your homework, but there's just someone was interviewing uh Denzel Washington, was it Denzel, talking about the same thing, and he talks about it's about, oh no, it's directors. And he just talked about it's cultural. There's a
Mhm.
cultural feel that when you grow up in a kosher kitchen, or when you grow up going to synagogue, or when you grow up hearing people complain, um, it allows you to tell a story honestly. They're great actors who do characters, but I always like watching a very honest way to tell a story. I love
Yeah.
Jason Kravitz. He had a show last night at Catalina Jazz. He's in town. He's brilliant.
Yeah,
But
he's
he
amazing.
plays every Jewish lawyer on TV, so he's he's playing all the
It's
Jews.
true. Yeah. Yeah, he is amazing. And by the way, he's going to be a guest on our Amusing Jews show pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. Joey, do you have any questions for Rena? Any last questions before we wrap this up?
I'm trying to think about the fact that, hysteria and hysterical comes from the like root of uterus as well. Like maybe women are extra funny. Yeah, sorry, I said uterus on a podcast. Maybe that's offensive to some, but yeah, I'm just wondering like what it is because Rena, I was thinking a little bit about a family member who accused me of falling tuchus backwards into various jobs. And I feel like you've come by your work very honestly, although, I'm sure that there have been struggles. And part of what I was noticing is, some of it was because you're kind of funny and also a really wonderful singer. Somebody said we should get you a record deal. They're probably not aware that you actually have a couple of CDs out. So we'll plug that. But yeah, there was also like the compassionate side of you where you were, talking about connecting with elderly people and talking about, being compassionate and caring towards other people. I'm wondering, is there what's the through line between the nurturing that we sometimes say is, feminine, but what's the connection between nurturing and comedy?
Ooh. I think it goes back to what Sid said, write what you know. I think it's about knowing who you are and and being I think funny comes from truth, and so I think as truthful as you can be, which takes a lot of vulnerability, but a lot of nurturing of yourself, um, then that can come off as funny. I think timing is everything. I think it also helps that I was raised in New York near the Catskills. It's like it was in my water, I think. It seeped down the Hudson. Um, but I don't know what the core. Some people are funny, some people are talented in other ways. I can't draw or do math or pay my bills on time, but I can try to make this customer service person laugh who I'm begging for an extension. Um, but I think it's just about truth and it's about being able to laugh at yourself. Laugh at you and your faults and that light self-deprecation, which Jews do, which I think we've created. We don't laugh at other people. We don't put people down in our comedy. We put ourselves down to connect, and I think that is just a very strong trait of Jewishness.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.